After 3 years of hype, Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice is finally here. So what did the world think of it? Oh, that's not a good sign at all. Without a doubt, Batman v Superman is the most important film in the history of DC Comics, and also I'd say Warner Brothers, the film studio. They're trying to launch a superhero franchise on par with what Marvel is doing with the Avengers, but with DC rushing Batman v Superman out, instead of taking their time developing their franchise, they have put a lot of pressure on this film to succeed. And if this film is a failure for Warner Brothers, for DC, it puts their future of their superhero franchise in jeopardy. So, with that said, is Batman v Superman a disaster? I really need to emphasize how important this film's success was. Warner Brothers hasn't been able to launch a blockbuster since 2013. Warner Brothers spent 3 full years hyping up this film. 3 full Comic-Con cycles. As early as May 2014, we were already being shown what Batman and the Batmobile looks like, almost 2 full years before release. Over the past year, we were given trailer after poster after detail about what the film would be and why it's going to be so awesome and how it's going to launch this new DC universe. The official budget, $250 million, is already incredibly huge, but there are some unofficial rumors that the budget went as high as $410 million, which could make sense. The film was delayed 8 months so that Warner Brothers could make sure the film was as good as it possibly could be, and that kind of 8-month delay, it sort of does click that there would be maybe even an extra $100 million unreported thrown at the movie to succeed from Warner Brothers. And then the sheer marketing over the past couple months. Batman v Superman was everywhere. It may have had more marketing than Star Wars: The Force Awakens, and you have to consider all of the money spent towards marketing is still coming out of Warner Brothers. Sure, they had partners pick up the funds like Turkish Airways during the Super Bowl, so not all of the advertising money came from Warner Brothers, but that doesn't excuse the fact that the film underperforms with that level of marketing. Now, did the film underperform? Well, let's take a look. The reviews from critics are dismal, to say the least. 29% on Rotten Tomatoes. But then you look at the audience reviews also on Rotten Tomatoes, it has 71% of approval. That's a very big disconnect between the general audience and the critics. And then you look at IMDb, which is all user reviews, and it's averaging a 7.3, which is still fairly decent. That's around even better, I believe, than what Iron Man 2 was averaging. I believe Iron Man 2 has a 7.0 on IMDb. So there are some fans out there, some people in the general audience who do enjoy this film. However, the cinema score for the film, cinema score is a highly regarded tool within Hollywood. Batman v Superman got a B cinema score. Now a B, you're thinking, oh, a B is still pretty good. No, not for blockbusters. If Transformers Age of Extinction can get an A- and Batman v Superman gets a B, that should tell you how bad the overall opinion is of Batman v Superman. Now, opinion from both the critics and audiences is one thing, but what Warner Brothers is concerned about, what DC is concerned about, is how much money this makes in the box office. And that's the true barometer of success for these kinds of films. So, how is Batman v Superman doing in the box office? It could be doing better. Before the film came out, some anonymous sources within the industry came out saying that the film Batman v Superman needed to make at least $800 million worldwide just to break even, and needed to make $1 billion worldwide to be considered a success. Now, let me give you some context. Both The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises made just over $1 billion worldwide, and that was 8 and 4 years ago or something along those lines. So, with Batman, of course, being in this film, and Superman and Wonder Woman, you have to think, yeah, if Batman alone could do it half a decade or so ago, that's a reasonable expectation for Batman v Superman to make that kind of money. And it's going to fall short, at least of the $1 billion mark. On its opening weekend, Batman v Superman brought in $166 million, which was somewhere within reasonable expectations. It's the highest opening ever for March, and the second highest opening in the history of Warner Brothers Studios, with the highest being Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2. Now, initially, Warner Brothers predicted Batman v Superman to break their own studio record. They first announced that the film made $170 million opening weekend before having to lower their estimates the following day, which is never a good sign. The film made over $80 million the first day, but then fell off as the weekend progressed, again as toxic word of mouth kicked in for the film. Over its first week, it fell behind what Deadpool and also last year's Furious 7, which was also an Easter release, it fell behind what those movies were making in their respective first Monday through Thursday cycles. So, film is slowing down early. In its second weekend, right now, as I'm recording this on Saturday early afternoon, Batman v Superman is expected to take a tumble of 70%. It's expected to make 70% less in its second weekend than it did opening. Now that is a incredibly huge amount. It would be the worst drop-off for a superhero film, even worse than the much maligned X-Men Origins Wolverine. So just let that sink in for a moment.
6 hours later.
2 a.m. on Sunday. Looks like right now the best case scenario for Batman vs. Superman this weekend is $50 million total with a 70% drop. Clearly toxic word of mouth kicking in full force at this moment. Films that had a worse opening than BVS but a better second weekend include Deadpool, Furious 7, and Iron Man 2. Now, if we assume that Batman v Superman will end up totaling about 320 through 350 million domestic, let's see how that compares to other superhero films. The Dark Knight ended up with 553 million, Dark Knight Rises 448 million, Iron Man 3 409 million, and Deadpool at the moment has 352 million. So right now, it's very likely that Batman, Wonder Woman, and Superman, the trio all together, will end up making less money in America than Marvel's psychopathic Jester. How is that not a failure for Warner Brothers? Now, extrapolating from the data we have, we can also conclude that Batman v Superman will end up with somewhere around $800 to $900 million worldwide, which is below the $1 billion that supposedly was needed for this film to be considered a success, and also below several other superhero films. This film is a critical failure and looks like it's tanking in the box office. And when I say it's tanking, don't get me wrong, $800 to $900 million worldwide is still great, but Warner Brothers had so much riding on the success of this film. They have up to 10 more films planned out, a whole cinematic universe that has been riding on the success of Batman v Superman, and with this film not even cracking $1 billion worldwide, Warner Brothers has to start considering Zack Snyder, director of Man of Steel, director of Batman v Superman, director supposedly of the upcoming 2-part Justice League film. Is he the right man to continue to steer your franchise? Now, there's already some signs that Warner Brothers may be getting ready to jump out from the bleak tone of the Snyderverse, supposedly. Suicide Squad, for example, has been going into massive reshoots over the past couple weeks so that the very dreary tone of the film can be completely changed to match the fun, lighthearted tone of the trailer that was very well received back in January. Warner Brothers wants the film to be a success, of course, and people loved how happy and funny the trailer was, so they're changing the film supposedly to match. Wonder Woman's already being filmed for release next year. I'm actually pretty confident that film's going to be directed by Patty Jenkins, who is a great filmmaker in her own right, and I actually thought Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman was one of the best parts of Batman v Superman, so I'm actually really looking forward to that film. Justice League Part 1 is supposed to come out November 2017, 18 months from now, and it's supposed to begin filming in a few weeks. That means the script is done, storyboarding pretty much done, cameras are getting ready to roll. Zack Snyder's supposed to be directing, but given how bad Batman v Superman is doing, how can Warner Brothers continue to support Zack Snyder? In fact, as I say this, there's a petition going around. It's already crossed, last I checked, 13,000 signatures to get Zack Snyder removed from the franchise. Now, it wouldn't be unprecedented for Warner Brothers to stop production on Justice League at the last minute. In fact, they already did it once before. Years and years and years ago, a Justice League movie was getting ready to film and was going to be directed by George Miller, the very esteemed director of Happy Feet and Happy Feet 2, and also Mad Max Fury Road. But Warner Brothers pulled the plug at the last minute. it's not too late for them to pull the plug on Justice League as well. Maybe replace Justice League Part 1 with a Ben Affleck directed Batman film. In fact, reports came out earlier this week that Ben Affleck already wrote a script for a solo Batman film. Could Warner Brothers possibly replace Justice League Part 1 with the Batflick? I think it's the smartest move for the studio at the moment, so they can focus on all these core individual franchises, make sure Aquaman launches well, make sure The Flash launches well, then take what's currently Justice League Part 2 scheduled for, I think, May 2019, I believe, turn that into the main Justice League film, get a different director, or at least take the time to make sure you're doing it right with Zack Snyder if you are so committed to Zack Snyder. I don't even know why Warner Brothers committed to Zack Snyder in the first place. It's not like he was an incredibly reputable filmmaker before. If this film keeps tanking in the box office, Warner Brothers has to seriously be questioning their commitment to Zack Snyder. So Warner Brothers, you need to make a decision. Are you going to stick with Zack Snyder, or are you going to bring in an actual filmmaker to get this universe you're trying to build back on course? Because let me tell you, Sony tried to make a cinematic universe with the Amazing Spider-Man. It didn't work out. They canceled it. They canceled their whole Sinister Six plus 2 more Amazing Spider-Man films. Will you do the same? Time will tell.
And here we go.
Anyways, that's all I've got today. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please, let's have a conversation in the comments below. What did you think of Batman v Superman? Personally, I thought it was but I can go into that more in the comments. Subscribe to my channel if you have not already done so, and stay tuned for more here on TV Junkie.